The last time we started with our discussion on how to assign the cost in a process costing system onto the completed goods and onto the ending work in process. Of course, if we have spoilage, we said, of course, normally in a process costing setting, we need to differentiate among two different categories of spoilage, normal spoilage and abnormal spoilage. We said that the normal spoilage will be considered an additional cost to the completed or to the good units that are completed and transferred out, while as the abnormal spoilage will not be inventoriable, will not be considered as inventoriable cost, and will be considered as a loss from abnormal spoilage and will be treated as a period cost and will be added or presented in the income statement for that period. Of course, now let us consider how we are going to treat the spoilage if we are talking about a job costing system, not a process costing system. Of course, we said in the beginning of the chapter number 17, the differences between the job costing and the process costing system. And we said in a job costing system, the products are unique. Therefore, each job would have different specifications than the other job. In a job costing setting or in a job costing, let us say, accounting system, we need also to differentiate among the two differences or the two categories of spoilage. We need to consider that we have normal spoilage also and abnormal spoilage. This is, of course, in a job costing system. But also in a job costing system, we need to further differentiate or further analyze the normal spoilage into two different categories. One which is attributable to a specific job, and the second is common to all jobs. Therefore, the normal spoilage, according to the job costing, needs to be categorized either as attributable to this specific job or common to all jobs. What do you mean by attributable to a specific job? It means that this normal spoilage is because of some of the specifications within this job. Because, of course, we said that in a job costing system, each job has a different specifications than the other jobs, correct? If the normal spoilage is because of these specifications, therefore, this normal spoilage will be attributable to a specific job, will be considered to be attributable to this specific job. But if the normal spoilage is not because of the specifications of a job or specifications of a particular job, then this normal spoilage will be considered common to all jobs. Therefore, this normal spoiled or this normal spoilage is considered common. Why? Because the specifications of the job did not attribute in having these spoilage or spoiled units. Therefore, in a job costing system, we need also to consider, to differentiate, to separate normal spoilage from abnormal spoilage, but further separation needs to be done onto the normal spoilage, whether it is attributable to a specific job because of the specifications of that specific job, or is it common, or if it is common to all jobs, that means that the specifications has nothing to do with this normal spoilage. So, what do you think we need to do if we found out that the normal spoilage is attributable to a specific job? Of course, we said that the normal spoilage should be added to the cost of the completed units, correct or not? Therefore, this is the same thing we are going to do with a job costing setting. But now we need to consider if it is attributable to a specific job or common to all jobs. So what do you think we need to do if the normal spoilage was considered to be attributable to a specific job? In this case, the cost of the spoilage or the normal spoilage will be an addition to the good units in this specific job and this specific job only. Any questions? Therefore, what we are going to do from an accounting perspective? What is the journal entry that we should do in order to make sure that this normal spoilage will be loaded onto the good units in this specific job? What do you think we need to do? Nothing whatsoever. We are not going to do anything. Why? Because in job costing, we said, in cost accounting 1, each job will have its own work in process account, correct? Therefore, the cost of these spoiled units will be already included in this work in process, will be already included in the work in process which is specific for this job, correct? Therefore, if we need to attribute these costs of the spoiled units to these good units in this specific job or particular job, therefore we are not going to do anything. Why? Because these costs are already included in the work in process for this specific job. Any questions? Therefore, what would be the accounting entry? Nothing at all. Now, on the other hand, if the normal spoilage is considered to be common to all jobs, what do we need to do? We need to prorate the cost of the spoiled units in this specific job to all the jobs within a particular period. Because why? Because we determined that this spoilage is not because of the specifications of this job, but it is because of the, let us say, normal specifications of all the manufacturing process that we have. Therefore, the cost of these units or spoiled units should be prorated and divided among all the units that has been finished in all jobs. Do you think of an account that is prorated and separated on different jobs? What do you think? Remember what we took in cost accounting 1. What is the account that we prorate? What is the type of cost that we divide among the different jobs? Excellent. Therefore, in this case, if we have normal spoilage that is common to all jobs, what we are going to do from an accounting perspective, we are going to take or transfer these costs of the spoiled units from that specific job and load it or carry it onto the manufacturing overhead, which will be prorated among all the jobs that we have within a particular period. Therefore, if we have common or spoilage or normal spoilage that is common to all jobs, we need now to transfer these costs of normal spoilage from this work in process that is specific for that job to the manufacturing overhead account, which will be prorated and divided among all the jobs that we have within a particular period. Therefore, we are dividing the cost of the spoiled units onto all jobs, not onto only one specific job. Now, if we have abnormal spoilage, the same thing. The costs are already carried within the work in process, correct? But are they specific for that job? Are they common to all jobs? No, because it is abnormal. Therefore, we should not tolerate or we should not treat these costs as inventoriable costs. Therefore, we are going to transfer these costs, which are abnormal spoilage, from the work in process, which is specific for a particular job, onto what is the account that we are going to use? The loss from abnormal spoilage. Therefore, this is the accounting treatment that we are going to consider if the abnormal or if the spoilage is deemed to be abnormal. We are going to transfer the cost of these abnormal spoiled units onto, from the work in process, of course, that is particular to a specific job, onto the loss from abnormal spoilage, which will be presented in the income statement as a separate line item. Any questions? Therefore, if it is or if the normal spoilage is attributable to a specific job because of the specifications of that job, therefore, these costs will be added on the cost of the good units for this specific job. Therefore, from an accounting perspective, we will do nothing. On the other hand, if the normal spoilage is deemed to be common to all jobs, we are going to allocate these costs, prorate these costs of the normal spoilage onto all the units on all or in all jobs. Not only in one job, but to all jobs. Therefore, we are going to take these costs from the work in process that is already carried within a work in process account for a specific job. We are going to transfer these costs onto the manufacturing overhead account, which will be then prorated and divided among all the jobs that we have within a specific period. Therefore, we are prorating these costs onto all the units that we have finished and completed in a particular period, whether it is for job number 1, 10, 20, 30, 50, and so on. If the spoilage is deemed to be abnormal, also again, we are going to transfer the costs that are already carried within the work in process that is specific for a specific job or a particular job, and transfer these costs onto a different account, which is the loss from abnormal spoilage. As we can see here, we did not consider, or we did not treat this type of cost as inventoriable cost, but as a period cost, because this loss will be presented in the income statement as a separate line item. Now let us consider an example. In the hull machine shop, 5 aircraft parts out of a job lot of 50 aircraft parts are spoiled. Therefore, we have 5 spoiled parts from 50. Therefore, we have 45 good parts, correct? Costs assigned prior to the inspection point are $2,000 per part. When the spoilage is detected, therefore, the cost of the 5 units would be 2,000. Correct? Because these are the costs up till or up to the inspection point. Therefore, each part of the 5 parts would have a cost of $2,000. When the spoilage is detected, the spoiled goods are inventoried at $600 per part. Why $600 per part? Because as they say, this is the net disposal value. Therefore, now, in this example, we are now to consider what if we have a disposal value for these spoiled units. Of course, according to the process costing examples, according to what we have just considered here, we did not consider that we have any disposal value. But now let us see what we are going to, or how the treatment will be different if we have a disposal value. Of course, this point was discussed the last time. So if we have a disposal value, what would we do to the spoiled units? Or what would we do to the cost of these spoiled units? Excellent. We are going to decrease the cost of these spoiled units by the disposal value, which is $600. Therefore, the cost is $2,000, correct? Per part. And now we have a disposal value of 600, which is a decrease in this amount. Therefore, 600 as a decrease. Therefore, the actual cost that will be treated, that will be considered, is the 1,400 as the normal spoilage or the abnormal spoilage, as we are going to see. Any questions? Now, let us consider the first situation if the normal spoilage is considered to be attributable to a specific job. What is the accounting treatment in this case? What do you think is the accounting treatment in this case? We are not going to do anything. Of course, we said we are not going to do anything. Why? Because we did not have any disposal value when we said so. In our discussion, when we said that the attributable or the normal spoilage that is attributable to a specific job did not have a disposal value. Therefore, all the costs that are carried within the work in process because of these spoiled units will be carried in the work in process as it is. But now we have a disposal value. Therefore, these costs that are carried within this work in process should be decreased because of the disposal value. Therefore, we are going to consider the following treatment. We are going to decrease the work in process control by the amount of 3,000, which is, of course, 600 multiplied by 5 units. And we are going to consider that we have spoiled units in our warehouses. Therefore, we are going to consider an increase in material control by also the amount of 3,000, which is 600 multiplied by 5. In this case, what did we do? We decreased the work in process for that specific job by the amount of 3,000. Therefore, as you can see from the example, we had 5 spoiled units, correct? Each unit with a $2,000 cost. Therefore, the costs of the spoilage would be 10,000. Is this the correct spoilage to be considered and to be carried within the work in process account for that specific job or job number? They did not give us the job. Therefore, let us say job number 5, for instance. Therefore, is this the amount, the correct amount to be carried within the work in process for this job? Of course not. Why? Because we have a disposal value. We have a disposal value by the amount of 600 per part, therefore 3,000 per part. Therefore, the correct answer or the correct amount of spoilage that should be carried within this work in process account is only 7,000. If I'm not going to do anything, if I'm not going to do the journal entry that we have just seen, therefore we are going to carry the 10,000 as spoiled units, as the cost of spoiled units that is attributable to this specific job. But in this case, because we have a disposal value, the correct amount to be carried is not the 10,000 but the 7,000. So how we are going to achieve this? Therefore, in order to achieve this, we are going to decrease the work in process by the amount of 3,000, and we are going to consider, we are going to, let us say, take into consideration the parts, the 5 parts with the realizable value of 600 as materials within our warehouses. Any questions? طبعا, of course, when we sell these amounts, we are going to consider the cash and the decrease in the materials control. طبعا, if sold, when sold. Any questions? Now let us consider, what if the normal spoilage is common to all jobs? If the normal spoilage is common to all jobs, as we said, we are going to transfer the cost of these spoiled units, the $10,000, we are going to take it from the work in process for that specific job and transfer them onto the manufacturing overhead. But do we need to transfer all the 10,000? Why not all the 10,000?
3,000 disposal.
What is the cost? Excellent. What is the cost of these spoiled units? The cost of these spoiled units is 10,000 minus their disposal values. Therefore, we are going to consider $7,000 as the cost of these spoiled units. Therefore, the manufacturing overhead account will be debited by only 7,000. And 3,000 will be considered as materials. Therefore, as we can see here, materials control will be debited by the 3,000. The manufacturing overhead control will be debited by the 7,000. Why the manufacturing overhead control? Because the manufacturing overhead control is the account that is separated and divided and allocated onto the different jobs. Therefore, if these costs are common to all jobs, therefore this is the best account to be accounted for, because the cost in this manufacturing overhead will be prorated and divided among the different jobs. And of course, as we can see here, the work in process specific to that job has decreased by the amount of 10,000. Why? Because we are saying that these spoiled units, which were deemed as normal, is not specific to this job, but it is common to all jobs. Therefore, we are going to transfer all the 10,000 from the work in process in that specific job, and then only put or only consider 7,000 as these costs, or the cost of these spoiled units, and the 3,000 are considered as the inventoriable cost of the spoiled goods. Of course, this amount is the realizable value or the saleable value for these spoiled units. Any questions? Now, what if the spoilage is deemed to be abnormal? In this case, if the spoilage is deemed to be abnormal, the same treatment. We are going to take the 10,000 from the work in process, but we are not going to put it in the manufacturing overhead. We are going to put it in the loss from abnormal spoilage. Therefore, the same treatment here. As we can see, materials control will be debited by 3,000. Loss from abnormal spoilage will be debited by 7,000. And the work in process specific to that job is credited by the amount of 10,000. Therefore, as we can see here, we have a slight change to what we took if we do not have any disposal value. The concept is the same. The concept is the same, just with a little bit of a difference. Any questions? Now let us consider the cost of rework. Of course, we said rework are defective units that does not meet the specifications of the final consumers, but can be repaired by incurring additional costs in order to change these spoiled units or defective units into good units. Therefore, these reworked units are good units after incurring additional costs to repair these spoiled or defective units. So what do you think would be the accounting treatment for this rework? Of course, the rework also, according to a job costing setting, needs to be classified either as normal rework or abnormal rework. The normal rework also should be further classified into two classifications, either attributable to a specific job or common to all jobs, the same as the spoilage in a job costing setting. Therefore, let us consider the same example or illustration of Hull machine shop. Of course, as we said, that the cost of the 5 parts, spoiled parts, were 10,000, correct? $2,000 per part, multiplied by 5, 10,000. And they gave us the different classifications of the costs for each part that we have. Of course, we have materials control $4,000, wages $4,000, manufacturing overhead $2,000. Therefore, as you can see, the total cost of these spoiled units or 5 spoiled units is $10,000. Sorry. Now, if these parts can be repaired and changed from defective units into good units, therefore we are going to incur additional costs, correct? This additional cost, according to our example, is as follows. Therefore, in order to change these 5 parts from defective units or spoiled units onto good units, we are going to incur additional $3,800 as 800 direct materials, 2,000 direct labor, 1,000 as manufacturing overhead. Therefore, what do you think is the accounting treatment if the normal spoilage, the normal rework was deemed to be attributable to this specific job? We are going to load all these costs onto the work in process that is specific for that particular job. Now, what if these costs or these spoiled units or this rework was deemed to be common to all jobs? Therefore, these costs will be loaded up onto the manufacturing overhead. Why the manufacturing overhead? Because we said that the manufacturing overhead is the account that is prorated, or is the costs that are prorated onto the different jobs and onto the different units in different jobs. What if these costs were deemed to be abnormal? Therefore, it is considered to be abnormal rework. Therefore, these costs will be loaded upon the loss from abnormal spoilage or abnormal rework, in this case, account. Therefore, the same concept as the spoilage in the job costing setting. As we can see here, this is as if the normal rework is attributable to a specific job. The work in process that is specific for that job would be loaded up by all the additional costs for the rework. As we can see here, 3,800 was the total cost of the rework, and all was loaded up and carried by the work in process control for that specific job. What if the normal rework is common to all jobs? Therefore, these costs will be loaded up onto the manufacturing overhead account in order to be prorated and allocated onto the different jobs and onto the different units that were produced in a specific period. On the other hand, if it is abnormal or if it is deemed to be abnormal rework, therefore, these costs or the cost of 3,800 or additional cost of 3,800 will be loaded upon the account that will be considered as a period cost, which is the loss from abnormal rework, which will be presented in the income statement for that period. Any questions? Now, in a process costing setting, the rework will be considered as if, of course, if we are talking about the normal rework, it will be considered as if this normal is common to all jobs. Why? Because in a process costing settings, we do not have different specifications among the units. All units have the same specifications. All the units are the same. Therefore, the costs of rework will be prorated and divided onto all the different units that were produced and finished within a particular period, which is the same as the job costing setting, which is common to all jobs within a specific period. Now let us consider the accounting for scrap. What did we say the definition of scrap is? We said that scrap is the additional material or residual material from any manufacturing process. Like, for instance, the remains of wood sheets, stamped metal, for instance, the edges of plastic after molding into some specific shapes, and so on. Therefore, this scrap could have a low total sales value. Therefore, as we said in our or at the beginning of the chapter, they will be considered or they will be treated the same treatment as if they are byproducts. Of course, according to what we took in chapter number 16, we said that byproducts have either or one of two treatments to be treated by, either by the sales method or the production method. The same thing here is for the scrap. Therefore, for the scrap, first of all, we need to consider whether to use or to recognize the scrap at the time of sale or at the time it is produced, which is the same as the sales method and the production method. Of course, we are going to consider scrap at the time of sale if the amount of scrap is immaterial. Or we are going to consider the sales method, or we are going to recognize the scrap at the time of sale if the scrap is material but sold quickly. Therefore, as we can see here, we said in chapter number 16 that at the time of sale, or the sales method, is not according to the generally accepted accounting principles, correct? But we said, why do we have the choice to use the sales method or the production method? Because we said that the amounts of the byproduct is usually immaterial. Therefore, it is, or we do not have any problem to use the sales method or the production method. Of course, the production method is the more accurate method because it is according to generally accepted accounting principles, and it is according to the matching principle. It matches the revenues with the expenses that are related to the generation of these revenues. But on the other hand, if the scrap is material, therefore we should have used the production method. But why do we have the ability or the choice to use the sales method? Because these scrap or this scrap materials are sold quickly. Therefore, we do not have a problem in applying the generally accepted accounting principles or applying the matching principle. What if the amount of the scrap is material but it is sold not quickly? In this case, we could not use the sales method. Why? Because first of all, we have a material value which will most definitely change our representation of the financial statements. Therefore, in this case, we are not going to use the sales method or the recognition of the scrap at the time of sale. We are going to use the production method at that time. If it is material and it is sold not quickly, if it is returned to the warehouses, and maybe we let us say, do not sell it as quickly as we should, or as we need to sell it. Therefore, in this case, we are going, according to scrap, we are going to use the sales method if the scrap is immaterial in value, or if it is material in value but it is sold quickly. While as on the other hand, we are going to use the production method or recognize it at the production or immediately after production if it is material, and we cannot use the sales method because it is sold not quickly. Therefore, if it is sold not quickly, it will be hard to attain the matching principle as if we sell it as quickly as we need to in order to match the revenues with the expenses. Therefore, the accounting for scrap is as follows. Let us consider the illustration for the hull machine shop. Assume the manufacturer of aircraft parts generates scrap and that the scrap from a job has net sales value of $900. Therefore, this is the disposal value of the scrap. Now let us consider, what if the scrap is immaterial? What if the scrap is material and sold quickly? What if the scrap is material and sold not quickly? Therefore, if it is immaterial, we are not going to classify the scrap into specific or attributable to a specific job or common to all jobs. We are not going to do this if it is immaterial. But if it is material, we are going to classify whether the scrap is attributable to a specific job or common to all jobs. Of course, as we can see here, scrap, we do not have anything or something called abnormal scrap. Why don't we have anything called abnormal scrap? Because we do not allocate any cost onto the scrap. As we can see here, we only recognize scrap by its realizable value. We do not use any cost, or we do not allocate any cost onto this scrap. So let us consider the first method. Let us say if the scrap is immaterial. If it is immaterial, of course, we are going to use, or we are going to recognize the scrap at the time of sale. Therefore, we are not going to recognize the scrap after the production. Of course, from a perspective or from a managerial perspective, of course, we need to calculate the amount, or not the amount, let us say, but the physical attributions or the specifications of the scrap in order to put it in our warehouses. We need to consider from a managerial perspective. But from an accounting perspective, we do not consider the amount of this scrap unless we have sold it to the final customer. Therefore, if it is immaterial, we are going to use the sales method. We are going to recognize only at the time of sale. Therefore, as we can see here, the cash or the accounts receivable will be debited, and of course the sales revenue will be credited by the same amount, which is the realizable value for this scrap. What if the scrap was deemed to be material? Now, as we said, if it is material, we need to consider or classify whether the scrap is attributable to a specific job or if it is common to all jobs. Of course, we are not going to, let us say, trace this scrap to a specific job unless the benefits are more than the cost of this tracing method, or according to this trace. Therefore, always we need to consider the cost-benefit analysis. Of course, if we recognize the scrap at the time of sale, and if the scrap is attributable to a specific job, therefore, when the scrap is returned to the storeroom, we are not going to consider, or we are not going to take any, let us say, we are not going to take any action from an accounting perspective. From a managerial perspective, we are going to take into account the scrap that were transferred into the warehouses. But from the accounting perspective, we are not going to make any journal entries. Now, when we are going to sell this scrap, we are going to consider the realizable value, because it is specific for that job, as a decrease in the cost of the manufacturing for that specific job. As we can see here, we credited the work in process control, which is specific for that job, by the amount which is the net realizable amount for the scrap. And of course, on the other hand, we are going to consider the cash or the accounts receivable that is generated from this sale. Now let us consider if the scrap is material and we are using the sales method, or we are recognizing the scrap at the time of sale, but the scrap is deemed common to all jobs. In this case, also, when we return the scrap to the warehouses, we are not going to consider anything from an accounting perspective, but from a managerial perspective, we are going to consider it, of course. We are going to record the physical attributes of the scrap. But when we are going to sell the scrap, we are going to take this from an accounting perspective. Of course, we are going to decrease also the cost. But because the scrap is common to all jobs, we are not going to decrease the cost of a specific job, but we are going to decrease the cost of all jobs. How? By decreasing the cost of the manufacturing overhead control, which will be prorated and allocated onto the different jobs. Now let us consider if the scrap is material and we are going to use the production method, or we are going to recognize this scrap after it is produced. Of course, if the scrap is attributable to a specific job, when the scrap is returned to a storeroom, therefore we are going to consider that the materials have increased for us, and the work in process, or the cost of a work in process which is specific to a particular job, will decrease by the realizable value that will be sold, or will be considered, or will be taken after selling this scrap. What if the scrap is common to all jobs? The same thing, we are going to consider, or we are going to have an accounting treatment right after the point of production. Of course, in this case, we are going to consider also that the materials control is debited, and on the other hand, we are going to decrease the cost of the manufacturing overhead control. Why? Because this scrap is deemed to be common to all jobs, not for a specific or for a particular job. Of course, when we are going to sell the scrap, we are going to decrease the materials that were considered at the time of production, and we are going to increase our cash, or recognize the accounts receivable on that end. What if the scrap is reused? What if the scrap is not sold but reused? Of course, if it is reused, therefore, when the scrap is returned to the storeroom, we are going to consider from a production method point of view that the materials control will increase, correct? And of course, the manufacturing overhead control, if the scrap is deemed to be common to all jobs, the manufacturing overhead control will be decreased by the same amount. Now, when we are going to enter these costs, or when we are going to use these scrap in a particular manufacturing setting, therefore the work in process that will use, or the job that will use this scrap in its manufacturing process, will be debited by the use of this scrap, of course using the net realizable value, not the cost. Of course, in a process costing setting also, the scrap will be recognized the same, of course, as here in the job costing setting, but always as deemed to be common to all jobs. Why? Because in a process costing system, we do not have any differentiation among the different units. All units are the same. All units have the same specifications. Of course, by this we have finished chapter number 18. Inshallah, the next time we are going to start with solving some of the problems. This would be the end of our, inshallah, or the coming lecture, inshallah, will be the last lecture in this semester, inshallah. And the next time, inshallah, we are going to talk about the examination and what to expect in the examination. Thank you for listening.